July 18th, 2006. I am Jessica Clark. It is a pleasure to conduct this interview for the Dakota Memories Oral History Project in Allen, Saskatchewan. To start with, can you please state your name?
My name is Reynold Zeiler.
Okay. And where were you born?
I was born in the Allen district in the northwest of 35, township 33, range 1 west of the 3rd. And I was born on a farm where my grandfather homesteaded in the same house that my grandfather had. And I was born there where there was no doctor. There was a midwife in the district that helped me into the world. And her name was Frances Stroh. And from there on, my parents moved to, they were here for half the summer, and then they packed up their gear in the 30s, which was 1931, and they moved to a town called Robin Hood, which is north of North Battleford, and out in a remote area where there was almost no roads, for one thing, and solid bush, and a few neighbors. And the reason he went up there is because the 30s were terrible here, so they went moving up to that area to try to make a living, I guess. So that's where they carried on from there, and they lived my dad built a little house that was 16 by 16 with a curtain in between for the bedroom, and it divided the kitchen off. Tar paper, we used to call them tar paper shacks. There was nothing, no insulation in the walls or no ceiling in the house, just a wood stove and a water pail, you might call it, for the drinking water, which in the wintertime would freeze right in the pail because it was so damn cold. Our sewer and water system was not too much. We had a outhouse that we used to go to visit when we had to go to the bathroom, that type of thing. And there was facilities just weren't there. We had no power. We had a little cola light that we had on the kitchen table. That was our means of light until about 4 or 5 years later. I remember my dad going to an auction sale, and he bought a gasoline lamp. And this lamp, I had never seen one before, but he brought it home from an auction sale, and there was one mantle on it. And of course he had it on the seat, and of course as a little kid, I was, like most kids, I was kind of curious, so he said, "Don't you touch that mantle." Of course he unhooked the horse and put it in the barn, and as little kids would do, I had to go over and have a look at this lamp. I was so proud because we're going to have light in the house. So I go and put my finger through this mantle. Well, my dad was just about fit to be tied because I didn't have another mantle to put on it. So that's one of the things that I remember as a kid before I went to school even, And then when I started school, we were 2.5 miles from school, and my father took me the first day to school, walked me to school through the bush, and from there on I walked every day myself through the bush to school. 2.5 miles. Thought nothing of it. Everybody today would have fears of it, but I didn't have no fear because it was just everybody done the same thing, eh? That's all there was to it. And I went to that school. I got to grade 8, and then in 1945, we moved to Allen District here, back home again. And from there, I went to school here in Allen for a year, and then I had to help on the farm, and there was no more school left for me to carry on to. Then we moved to a farm south and west of Allen, about 10 miles, which was called Admore Beach. There was a farm site there. And we lived on that farm until about 1952. And then my parents bought a house in town here, and then they moved to town, and we stayed on the farm for another year, and then we moved off the farm, and my dad bought other land, and we farmed from town. And in 1953, I went working in the oil patch for a couple of years, and then I come back and I bought some land north and east of town here, which is still my original farm site. And in 1956, I got married to Doreen Rosart at that time, and we raised 3 children. We lived on the farm till 1985. Then we moved into this house in town here. And my son took over the farm. He was already working at the potash mine for a number of years, and he took over the farm, and he lived there for a while, and then he moved to town, and he bought a house in town, and he still farms the land that the original farm site was on. And this year we celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary, and we had a celebration at the hall. We had something like 100 and some people there for guests, and our original wedding group were all able to come home to be with us for this celebration. And I guess that's kind of my life history as far as my personal type thing is goes.
You told us exactly where you were born, which I find really interesting when people can get the township and the section and the coordinate and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But when were you born?
Well, I guess I forgot that one. I was born on the 26th of August, 1931.
Can you tell me one of your earliest childhood memories?
My earliest childhood memories, okay. Living in the house on the farm up in the Robin Hood district. The house was very small, and we were sitting one night we had supper, and my dad was, after supper, sitting beside a window, and I'm sitting alongside him, and lightning struck. We had a lightning storm, and lightning struck the house. Didn't do any harm to the house, but my dad had the window open, we were sitting beside, and the door open, and the lightning went right through the house, the ball of lightning. It knocked us both over, and it went out again, but didn't hurt the house any.
Well, how old were you?
About 5 years old.
When you were growing up, was it a common thing to witness severe thunderstorms and severe weather?
Very much so, yeah. Yeah, it was. For some reason, weather was violent in those days. I don't know why. Maybe because it was in the bushland. I don't know, but there was always, we seemed to be in the right place for the storm all the time, you know. But there was some good times too. There was lots of nice weather as well, you know. Winters were tough. In those days there was no roads, so there was no vehicles, where everything was horse-drawn. The summertime, my dad had a buggy and a horse, and that was our means of transportation going to town. We were 9 miles from town in those days, and if there was any heavy hauling to do, which was the grain, which wasn't a whole lot of it, that was taken in by a wagon and 2 horses, and with a load of grain with 50 bushels on the wagon, and that was the way everybody done the same things. They thought nothing of it, you know. It was just basically a prairie trail is what it was all about, going to town.
So did you ever experience like a tornado or a blizzard or anything like that?
Yes, but in later life, in 1955, we had a storm here that lasted for 3 days, and we didn't dare leave the house. That's how bad it was. You couldn't see across the street. We had cattle at that time. We just put everything, opened the barn door and turned all the cattle in and fed them what we could to just to keep them alive. It was an unbelievable storm. I couldn't see nothing. People got lost here going home. Some guys were hanging on to line fences to be able to get themselves close to their home, that type of thing. That's how bad it was.
When you were growing up, what was it like on the plains? If you could just tell us a little bit about what life in the plains was like.
Well, it was pretty quiet as far as entertainment was concerned. Everybody made their own entertainment, basically. Sundays was, of course, you had to go to church. That was number one. And then, of course, after church, by the time you got home, which was probably 1 o'clock or something like that, and then sometimes you get together and have a ball game. The neighbors would come over, or we'd go to the neighbors and play a little ball, and until 4 or 5 o'clock, and then you had to go home and do the chores. It was time to do the milking, and everybody milked cows. So there was always lots of work to do. There's no doubt about that. Part of the living. And that's about all I can think of right now. Unless you can ask me something else about it, I wouldn't know.
Well, actually, I think what we should do right now is turn to your family and talk a little bit about your family history. Let's start with your dad's side of the family.
Okay.
Your grandparents. Did you know them?
No, I didn't know my grandparents, but I knew their names. My grandfather's name was Felix Zeiler. And my grandmother's name was Elizabeth. Bitz, maiden name Bitz, eh?
And how do you spell Bitz?
B-I-T-Z. And, of course, my dad was the baby of 9 siblings of the family. And his name was Roy. And he immigrated to Canada in 1927, on July the 26th of 1927. And he had an uncle in Canada, his name was Balzer Bitz, which was his mother's brother. Then he stayed with them for a few days to get familiarized with the district. Then he went out to work for one of Balzer's sons, Andrew. And he worked on Andrew Bitz farm for 3 years. And I remember him saying yet when he come over here, what a shock it was, the change of life compared to at homeland. Everything was community type living over there, where here it was people were out on big farms and stuff like that, quarter section, half section, that type of thing, So that was a big change. I remember him telling me that. And then he met my mother, I guess, somewhere along the line, and he got married in 1930, January the 5th, 25th, 1931. I'm born in August of that same year, 31. So after he got married, the first few months he lived, that's why I was born on my grandfather's farm. They lived over there, and he worked for my grandfather for a few months until he decided to go up north where we lived in the Robin Hood district.
How old was your father when he immigrated?
17 years old.
So did his parents immigrate with him, or just
No,
him?
He come all by himself. He come to visit. He come over here because of his uncle was over here.
Okay.
And the reason he left Russia because of the turmoil. The communists were pretty bad then already, and he didn't want to be a soldier and have to fight war over there.
Did he ever tell you a little bit more about what life was like in Russia?
Mm-hmm. I can add a little bit, not a whole lot, but I can tell you that in Russia in 1922, he tells me that there was starvation, and his dad was dying, and he was dying of hunger. He was sick beside, but dying of hunger. And my dad went out into the forest looking for something to eat, and he found a horse's head, and he dragged that home, was kind of decayed, like already. He dragged it home for something to eat, like, And when he got home, his dad was dead already. So some of the the other things, like his brothers, they were very aggressive individuals, and they lived in a town that were mayors and things like that, leading individuals like in the district. Of course, when the Russians came in, they didn't want those kind of people. They took them away, because they might do them harm, And one of them was taken away at nighttime, and never ever did see him again after that. And the other brother he had was he come home from town. Their town was Marienthal in Russia, which was 16 kilometers out of Odessa, and they always took things to town like grain or produce, and brought flour and stuff like that back for food. And when he got halfway home, the gypsies were pretty common over there, and they ordered him off the wagon. He wouldn't get off the wagon, so they shot him right there. Staying within the same side of the family, during the war years, I have a cousin that was taken prisoner by the Germans from the same district, and he was taken back into. I had two cousins, in fact, two of them. One was Emram, and the other one was Magdalena. Emram Zeiler and Magdalena Kocher, and they were prisoners taken back into Germany by the Germans. Of course, they had to go by the wagon track, and at that time there was thousands of people were just taken back. And my cousin Magdalena Kocher, she had triplets on the way, and only one survived. The other two didn't survive. And then she went, and while she was in Germany, Germany, of course her husband was in the German army, and she went to visit him in Berlin. And just at the end of the war, when things was in a terrible turmoil, that's when she was there visiting. And of course the Germans surrendered, and then she couldn't get back to her family. Her family were back in parts of Poland, and she had never seen those children for about 35 years after that. So the mother always kept praying, and she finally got back. She went over to Russia, and she went into Berlin just by chance. I guess they had some letters got through or something. I'm not sure just how this all went. And they went down the street and they met one another by accident. So that's how they got back together, on that whole story on it for children. And my other cousin Tony, he was taken war prisoner, and from the Germans took him into Germany. Of course, he had to be a German soldier, which everybody had to be, I guess, because they're running out of men already, because everybody was being slaughtered already, so-called slaughtered. And of course, after the war, as everybody knows on this side of the world, the Allies won the war, and then they were taken as German prisoners, and they were put in big areas of company men, like with wire fences and stuff like that. 10,000 men in a place like that, and nothing to eat, nothing to drink. They were in there for weeks and weeks, And he said everybody got so thirsty they used to take fire hose and spray them with the water, so they'd stick their tongue out because they were gasping for water and stuff like that, And then, of course, he was in there for about 3 weeks, he said. And then they sent him to Belgium. And in Belgium, they sent him to a coal mine. He was in that coal mine for 3 years. And he said that no food, or I shouldn't say no food, very little food. The broth and carrots and a half a slice of bread a day. And he said that you wouldn't believe this. He said they never had to go to the bathroom for 6 months because there was no fiber in the body. Just Didn't have to go, you know. Then after he was in the coal mines for 3 years, they released him as a war prisoner, of course. Then he went back to Hanover, and he got a job in a dry goods store selling men's clothing. And he was there until 1951. And then he had sent a letter to Canada. He knew he had an uncle in Canada, but didn't know where he was. And he sent a letter to the Red Cross to Canada, and somebody in Hoxie, Kansas, if you know where that is, picked up this in a German paper down there that there was somebody looking for somebody in Canada by this name. And somebody in Regina got the same paper, and they knew that my dad was living in the Allen district. And of course, from there on, my dad got this letter, and he read it, and then he answered them back. So that's how they got in contact. And then a year later, my dad sent him money, $250 to come over that time, come to Canada. He come here in August the 9th, 1952. And now he lives in Regina. He lived in Regina. He's dead now. He married, he had a girl from Germany, and they had one son, and his name is Gary. That's about what I can think of on that side of the family now.
Did your dad, when he immigrated over, since he was 17, did he ever talk about the actual voyage and how he got over here?
Yes. He was on the boat. He was from Moscow to Liverpool, from Liverpool to Quebec City, and from Quebec City to Allen. And he talks about the boat ride. He got seasick. It took 3 weeks to get come over. He was on the boat called the Empress of Scotland. And he was, like I said, he told us he was sick for damn near 3 weeks of the waves, rocking of the boat and stuff like that. He said he was never so glad to get his foot on land again, that type of thing. Yeah, and anyway, when he got to Quebec City, he had something like I'm not sure what it was anymore, a couple of $8 or something. I'm not even sure that's what he had in Canadian money. And he said when he got to Allen, he still had the $8. He said people along the way were helping the immigrants out in those days to come through. They put up a little food or a sandwich or something like that. And he was met at the train here by his uncle, which was Balcher Sander. And then he stayed there for that time, and then went to work on the Andrew Bitts farm.
Did he ever tell you how much it cost him to?
Yes, $220, and the money had to be put up on this side of his uncle put up the money. So they had to have a guarantee that in those days, well, I guess maybe they still do. They had to have a guarantee that they'd have a home here or that type of thing. So they had to be footed the bill on this end, and he worked that off by working for his cousin.
1927. That was kind of late to be leaving Russia.
Yeah.
Did he ever tell you why he came later versus leaving earlier?
Well, one of the reasons because he was only 17 years old is one of them, but the other reason was to get away from the communist regime, basically. The Bolsheviks. He said when he seen his brother was taken away at nighttime, that was more than enough already. And this when his other brother got shot because of, well, gypsies are just as bad as communists. They take anything to get their hands on anyway. So that's another one of the reasons he got out of there. And he was looking for adventure. He said, I was young.
Let's turn to your mother's side of the family. Did you know your grandparents on that side?
Yes, I did. My grandparents were John and Margaret Winiger. And they come to Saskatchewan from Hague, South Dakota in 1907 to the northwest of 35, Township 33, Range 1 west of the 3rd. And that farm still is in the family. We farm that land today. It's not, we don't own it, but we farm it. And my mother was born on that farm. She was born in 1910. And she got her education in the Allen School, which was limited to grade 8 in those days.
Your grandparents, they came from South Dakota. Did they originally come from Russia to South Dakota?
They come from Odessa, Russia, yeah.
Okay.
Yes, they were in a town called Kendall in Russia. The Winnegar clan come from that area. I shouldn't say that my grandparents, my grandpa did. My grandma come from she come from I think Moriental, I think. I'm not really sure of that one. I'd have to be corrected on that one. But anyways, she come with her parents from Russia, and then she married my grandfather in 1904 in Hague, North Dakota. I stand to be correct on that date too. I could be out a year on that one. I'm not sure on that one, but it's pretty close anyway.
I'll say about.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me a little bit about what your grandfather was like? What type of a grandfather was he?
My grandfather was a tall man. I only knew him to speak German. He didn't. He might have understood English. I don't know. He didn't. As little kids, we had to speak German to him. I know that. He was a fairly aggressive individual, a great horseman. He always had top-notch horses, and a very kind man. They had 8 children, and all the family were well brought up. They were well looked after in that respect. They're still kind of recognized in the community as some of the better citizens in their day, very helpful, very helpful. My original grandmother died in 1922 from a gallbladder operation. And my grandfather married another lady by the name of Margaret Merck in 1923. And she brought in 3 children with her in the same household. But the children were, the only one was at home yet. The other 2 were gone already, working. Or married, I think. I'm not even sure. And then they, in 1927, they moved to town, and they bought a house in town, and that's where they resided until he died in 1941. And in that same house, and then my step-grandmother died in 1943.
Are they buried out in the Allen?
They're all buried in the Allen district, right?
Can you spell your step-grandmother's last name?
Weninger.
Okay. When you would go and visit your grandparents, what type of things would you do with your grandparents?
What was my grandparents? Well, it was pretty minimal what you do with your grandparents. Grandpa would always take us downtown and buy us treats and stuff like that, which is normal. But they weren't outgoing like, what should I say, like grandparents are today. They were more the home type people. Visit with us, stay with us, that type of thing. And one thing I do remember, I used to like to chew sunflowers, and my grandfather always had sunflowers in the veranda in the house, dry on the heads, and they were dry, and that's what That's one of the reasons why I went to Grandpa, because he always had sunflowers, you know. And my grandma always had watermelon. I remember that real well. She always pickled watermelon. I liked watermelon. That was one of her favorites, I guess, to put together, and I loved it.
You mentioned that they would come and visit or stay over. When they would stay over, where would they sleep?
You talk about my grandparents? Mm-hmm. No, my grandparents never did come to visit us. No,
oh, okay.
No. They did I say that?
Maybe I misheard.
Oh,
I didn't.
no. We used to come to visit our grandparents.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you ever stay the night over there?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, that was kind of the home base for my mother. I had to stay there, you know, and then go from there out to visit my uncles and aunts around town.
Okay. How many children did you say that you never knew your biological grandmother, but how many children did your grandfather have?
8.
8. And where was your mother in that order?
Let's see, I got I think there's out 6, 3, 7. My mother was the third youngest of the family.
Okay. Was she born, she was born here, so
in
she
Allen,
doesn't have any memories of North or South Dakota?
No.
Can you tell me a little bit about your mother?
My mother was, she was a good mother, really a good mother. She was able to do any kind of farm work. She used to help my dad, and I remember this real well as a kid. Lots of bushland to clear up. You know, my mother used to drive the horses with a chain and on the front part of a wagon and pull the stumps out of the ground to clear land and then pile this stuff up so it could burn it and clean it up. And that was her job every day, to go out and help Dad do this all. And the same when we're doing that, of course, we were two or three little boys at the time, and she used to set us under a tree, you know, with a couple of cats and a dog and a little bit of lunch and stuff like that, and water, of course, while we were doing this, and they'd be out there working all day, pulling roots, and if you cleaned out in a season 4 or 5 acres, that was a big job. You had a lot of work done already, just to get that cleaned up and pile that up and get ready to plow the following spring, like, you know, to get ready to put some crop into it, you know. Of course, there was lots of stones too, so there was stone picking as well involved. Heavy work, you know, that type of thing. And then Mum was pretty handy around the yard too. She could milk cows, I'll tell you. We used to milk 12 and 14 cows, and as a little boy, I milked 4. My mother could milk 8 or 9. So that's how good a milker she was, you know. And we sold milk cows and sold cream and stuff like that. And the milk that we had went to the pigs, skim milk, of course. And Dad did all the field work. He had 6 horses that he did the field work with what there was. And in the farm that we lived in up north was in the arm of Medstead, which was about 35 miles north of Battleford, and we were on the southeast of 5 of the land description. I'm not sure what meridian anymore. It's been too long since I've read it, but I remember his Dad talking about the southeast of 5. And when we had left that quarter, he had something like 60 acres broke on the quarter, and the rest was pasture. Of course, then we moved to another farm later on in about 1939. We moved to another farm site, which was 2 miles away north of us, and then there he had another half section. And that farm had a bigger house on it that had a 2-room house, a 3-room house exactly, that's quite a bit bigger than what we had in it. We thought we were really in heaven. We got a 3-room house now, and there we had livestock and mixed farming, pigs and chickens and everything as well. And then in 1940, my dad bought a threshing machine and a tractor and then he went out doing custom work, thrashing. And he used to have a crew of 9, 10 men every fall go out do custom work. And it was several falls. They were out 25 days doing harvesting. Those days everything was cut with a binder and stooped, and had to be all hauled in with wagons and horses to get a ring to the machine. And then in 1941, my dad bought a brand new half-ton truck, a Chevy truck, $937. I'll never forget that. And that was wheels for us. So that's when the horses went out the window there. We were glad to get rid of them because we had a tractor and we had a truck to drive. That was a big step in our household.
Can you tell me what you mean by custom work? You said that your father would do custom work?
Yeah, he would go out and do custom thrashing. Thrashing was a way of harvesting your crop, bringing in the grain from the fields. It was brought in by bundles, and they would throw these bundles on the rack with a fork and bring them to the machine, throw it into the machine, and the straw would blow out the blower on the end of the machine, and the grain would come out on the side on a spout into a wagon, and that grain was taken from the wagon put into a building which was called a granary. And this was it wasn't a lot of grain. I mean, not by today's standards. It was small in those days, of course. But it was all hard work. It was long going. And my dad also done other custom work. When he bought the tractor, he went custom seeding. He bought a brand new one-way and a press drill. And he used to go out custom seeding, and they worked 24 hours a day. One man during the day, 6 to 12 hours, and he done the night shift. And if they done 20 acres in 24 hours, that was a good day. Yeah.
Can you tell me what your mother's name was?
Helen.
Helen, and your father's name?
Roy.
Okay. Can you talk a little bit about them as a couple? Did they interact well with each other?
Mm-hmm. They did, yeah. Yeah, my dad was. They were both. They got along well. Dad was always the decision maker, but Mom always went along with it. And they were very, very community-minded people. My mother was really community-minded. She could organize card parties, and she could organize house parties, and she could organize Sunday socials and dances in the school and stuff like that. She was very community-minded. And it all went over well all the time, too.
Were you close to your parents when you were growing up?
Yes, we were. We were all close to our parents. Yeah, very well.
Were they affectionate people?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, they were. They always took us wherever they went. We had to go to. That was just whether it was a house party or what it was. I don't know. We were all along. Yeah, they never left us behind. Nothing. School dance. We were along. There was many nights they'd be dancing till I guess 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm not sure because we'd be laying under the benches someplace sleeping, throwing a blanket over us or a coat or something. And we'd be sleeping there. And then when they're ready to go home, they'd pick us up and throw us into the buggy, and away we went, I remember one particular time I can remember yet, there was a barn dance. I guess it was more of them, but I remember one barn dance, and I know the sun was coming up, and the folks were going home, and I was sitting in the backs, behind the seat of the buggy in the back of the floor, and it was pretty cool at that time, and I'm sitting there waiting couldn't get home fast enough because we were about a couple of miles from where the barn dance was. And I guess the folks must have had lots of fun because being there that long, I guess everybody stayed there. Nobody wanted to go home. They were having fun, that type of thing. That's the only entertainment basically they had when they got away from home, other than ball games in the summertime, that. Card parties in the wintertime, that was kind of their entertainment.
When were dances usually held?
What's that?
When were dances usually held?
When were dances? All year round except Lent. They could have been It could have been once a month. I'm not even sure anymore just how that all went, But I know in the summertime they always went to a place where they had a ball diamond. I know that. They play ball there and stuff like that. That was kind of a common thing. Or go down to the lake, which was called Jackfish Lake, which was only 17 miles away. That used to be combined with, there was a Catholic church there, and my mother used to take me along, and we'd go to church there and then have a lunch, then we'd spend an hour or two at the lake shore, just for the part of the afternoon, and then we'd come back home again. And 16, 17 miles with a horse in those days was a long ways to go, Yeah, church was usually at 11 o'clock. We had to leave at 8:30 to get there.
What time would church service start?
About 11 o'clock.
11 o'clock,
Yeah.
so good time to
Yeah,
get out there.
yeah.
You mentioned that your dad was the decision maker in the family.
Mm-hmm.
Was he also the strict one, the disciplinarian, or?
Yeah, pretty well. Yeah, my mother used to scold us, and she always used to say, "I'm going to tell Dad when he gets home." Yeah, we were respecting Dad when he was pretty tough, He was good, but he was tough,
So how were the children disciplined if they stepped out of line when you were growing up?
One of them was a strap, of course, that was always hanging on the wall. We got it a few times because we should have had it. We were pretty bad sometimes, how these kids get out of line, Today that doesn't go over worth a damn, but at that time that was it, The strap was the weapon. Or kneel in the corner for 15 minutes was another one.
What type of things were considered stepping out of line when you were a kid?
Fighting. That was number one. Couldn't get along. What the hell's going on here?
Well, if you were fighting, that tells me you had siblings. How many children?
I had 3 brothers.
Okay.
Yeah. It was usually over toys or something that in that nature, that it was my turn to play with, or it wasn't my turn to play with, I remember in 1940, my dad bought us a bicycle, and we were 3 boys at the time, and bicycles were hard to get because of the war, So anyways, he brought this bicycle home, now how are we going to run this? How are we going to get the equal time here? So my dad decided to each one have a day for the bicycle. And this went on winter and summer. When it was your day to ride the bike, you rode it because didn't matter if it was 40 below. If you wanted it, you had to ride the bike. It was your day, Yeah. And then my dad had a blacksmith shop, and kids used to make sleighs and stuff like that to play with as far as entertainment was concerned,
How would you make a sleigh?
Well, we'd have wooded boards that we'd cut up and make runners out of it and that type of thing, and bolt it together somehow or nail it together somehow, and it was a long ways from being perfect, but that's what we played with, entertain ourselves,
Do you remember any of the other toys that you had as a child?
Not really, just slingshots. You know what those are, but those were kind of weapons. After we got bigger, there was the odd window missing on the farm, and my mother my dad didn't take that very well, so he used to burn them. We used to make them as fast as he could burn them.
How would you make them?
Well, we'd go out in the bush and we'd get a willow branch with a Y on it, and we'd get some rubber off an old inner tube and 2 strips about a ½ inch wide, and we put it on there, make it about a foot long, and we'd find a piece of leather to put it between the end where we put our stone or whatever we used to put in there, and that was our shot. Like we'd shoot that and we'd aim it at something. And we used to be able to knock out gophers and stuff like that as kids, if you were accurate enough.
That was going to be my next question. What would you shoot it at?
Well, gophers and little rabbits and stuff like that, or if there was a crow or a magpie around, but I never did hit one, but we used to shoot at them, that type of thing,
of activities did you do when you were a kid for fun?
Well, we played ball. And there were school games that we used to play in school and stuff like that. You know. Some of the games were steel sticks or pom-pom pull away or drop the hanky and...
Did you say steel sticks?
Yeah.
What's that?
It's a game where there's a border between, choose up sides and there's a border wall between, you know, and then be a pile of sticks on either end of the, about 100 feet down from the border where the wall where we'd be either on either side, and then you try to run across to get a stick, you know, and if you did run across and then somebody would tag you, you couldn't take a stick. You had to be one of the sticks on that pile, eh? So that at the same pile on both sides, like, you know. So whoever got all the sticks won the game, like at that time.
And you said drop the hanky?
Oh yeah, that was kind of a little grade 1 game and type of thing, you know. The teacher would even play that with us. They'd take us, make a circle, you know, and then somebody would run around the outside and drop the hanky behind somebody. They'd pick up the hanky and chase that individual, get back into that ring, you know, before. And if you didn't catch them, then they could go around and drop the hanky to somebody else, and then they take off and try to catch the other one, you know. Pretty simple game.
And how did you play pom-pom pull away?
Oh boy, that's a long time ago already. I can think about that one. They used to take a rope and we'd choose up sides. It was more like tug of war instead of pull away, and then we'd pull on this rope and see who was the strongest of the groups. Pull one way or pull the other, and there was a line, a mark in the middle of the rope where you'd mark this, and if we got over to a certain mark on the end, you were the winner and stuff like that. Of course, if you're a winner, then you had to change size or change personnel to make it more equal to get the game to last longer, that type of thing, you know.
What other type of things did you do with your brothers and sisters when you were on the farm?
I have no sisters. I just 3
Oh yeah,
brothers.
there's 4 boys in your family.
Right
that's
on,
right.
yeah.
So what other types of activities did you do?
Oh, we used to ride horses. That was a kind of a common thing. Ride the cows once in a while when the parents weren't home. Ride the pigs when the parents weren't home. Get a dad's can of tobacco once in a while when he was a kid, you know. The only way we could hide that is we'd take a little tobacco, and then so he wouldn't know, we'd pick it up and puff it up a little bit, put the lid back on again, so he didn't know we were into the tobacco.
Did he ever find out?
He didn't find out about the tobacco, but he found cigarettes on me one time. As a little kid, you know.
What was his reaction?
Thou shalt not smoke. Yeah.
Did you ever get into any mischief when you were a kid, besides the tobacco?
Oh, there was mischief. I gotta think of this one. Oh, I guess we're always playing tricks on one another. There's no doubt about it, but I don't recall something of it, you know. Can't think of any on that line.
Can you tell me a little bit about, well, first, take me through the oldest child and the youngest in your family, their names.
Well, I'm the oldest, Reynold. And I have a brother, Ed, born in 1932. He was born at Robin Hood. Born at home. And I have a brother, Percy, born in 1933. He was born in a little town not too far away from us called Rabbit Lake, where there was a hospital and a doctor in those days, about 20 miles away. And I have a brother, Leo, that's born in 1941. He was also born in Rabbit Lake.
Okay, so let's start with Ed. What was Ed like when you were a kid?
Ed was a hot-tempered boy. He always a poor loser. Always And when we played ball, if he lost, he threw the bat. He got mad. Those type of things, But he was good worker and all that. But just that one of his characteristics, temper was high all the time, He was curly-haired, good-looking boy. He went to school here in Allen later on in life, and he got his grade 11 here. Then from there he went to a tech school in Saskatoon, and he became a partsman, and he worked for the Dodge people for a number of years, and then he went working after that for a dairy firm, and he was delivering ice cream and stuff for a number of years in the rural areas with a truck. Then in 1957, he got married in 1957 to a girl by the name of Irene Weniger, and they resided in Saskatoon. And he, in 1958, he bought a transport truck, and he had hauled cars and trucks for all his life. He lived in Saskatoon until about 1967 or 68, and then he moved to Calgary. Then he was hauling cars from Vancouver all over Western Canada. And he retired from that particular occupation. And my third brother, Percy, he went to school in Allen here. He got his grade 11 here. And then he went to Vancouver, and he worked out there for a while. His girlfriend was out there, so that's why he went out there. He was only out there about a year. Then he come back that next year, and they got married the same year as my other brother, 1957, but a month later. And he started working for Safeway stores in Saskatoon as a butcher in the meat department. And he stayed there for, I guess, about 3 years. I'm not even sure on that one. Then he moved to Regina. And then he worked for the Safeways in Regina for a short while, and then he got tired of that. Then he went selling insurance, life insurance. And he worked for the Crown Life people for probably 4 or 5 years. And then he was a pretty powerful salesman. They wanted to put him in the office. Of course, after you do so well out when you're on the road, they want to get you in the office because you should be promoting other salesmen, stuff like that. And he warned them. He said, if you put me in the office, I'm quitting. Well, they said, you have to come into the office because we need your help in here. And he never did go in the office. He quit them. He said, I can't stand it in the office. I got to be out in the rural people. He was a people's person. He had to be out like that. So anyway, after that, he bought a hotel at Fillmore, Saskatchewan, which is southeast of Regina, about 50 miles, something like that. And he run a hotel down, a bar, and a restaurant. And he done very well there. And he was there for about 4 or 5 years, and then he went to Fifth Current, Saskatchewan. He bought a hotel down there. A big hotel down by the railroad track. And he had something like 18 on staff there, and then he bought a motel besides, and he had run that for a number of years. And he also had a farm down at Gull Lake, about 25 miles south of Fifth Current. Had about 5 quarters of land out that way, and he farmed that for 2 or 3 years. And I asked him one time why he sold the land. He said, I have to be where there's people. He said, I can't stand it out in the farm. So he sold the farm, and then one day he got an idea that he figured he was paying too much taxes. So he got his accountant in, and they sat down and did some bookwork. And he said, the accountant figured out the difference between the taxation base in Saskatchewan and in Alberta. And when he figured it all out, he said that if he moved to Alberta, he could save enough money to raise his family out there, just on taxation alone. The difference in the taxes, income tax and all the other taxes in his province. So that's where he went. He moved to Alberta, and then he got involved in land development out there. And he was in that for a few years, and he done pretty well on that. And then he got a chance to go. He moved to Didsbury, which is north of Calgary, about 50 miles, and he went working for Elephant Brand fertilizer people, which is selling fertilizer to farmers and that type of thing. And then he added his own custom application system, applicating equipment to the BizJet, and he done very well on that. And he was into just about, you name it, he was into the farming end of it, whatever, as far as delivering stuff is concerned. And he sold that about he was in it about 5 or 6 years, and he sold that out there, and he retired after that. And then they did a lot of traveling. They were all over the world. There isn't a place in the world where they haven't been, I don't think. The winters they spend most of the time in Mesa right now, and they still live in Didsbury. They have a little bit of health problems. He's had some back problems and that type of thing, and his wife has had a couple of hip surgeries. She just finished one here just recently, and they're still living there, and they're doing okay. And my third brother, he's born in 1941. He was living in town here. He got his grade 10, and my father had property in town here. They developed a trailer court in 1964, and he was kind of running it for a little while. Then he didn't. It was boring to him, so he went to Saskatoon. He started driving truck, or had his own truck, and he was hauling merchandise. I forget what it was all about, but he was driving truck anyway, and he did it for a number of years. And he bought another unit, and he was hauling bulk flour from the mill in Saskatoon to Regina. A trip a day, you take it down there. And he sold that, and he went into bus driving, driving tour bus. And he did that for many, many years. There isn't a place in North America he hasn't been. I know my wife and I, we were to Alaska a couple of years ago. We went up there, and we thought we did quite a venture going up there. And I told my brother about it, and he had to laugh when I told him, because he said, I was only up there 22 times. So I thought, couldn't believe it, He never did tell us where all he went to, but I know he was down in Miami and all over the U.S. to California and East Coast and all along the U.S. and Canada, West Coast, down into Mexico, all over you could think of, all over the world. He enjoyed that, but he said the only problem is you're never at home. So he decided that he would take a different job here, and he got into a local type of delivery here in town here, so that he spent some time at home. And that's kind of the extent of my family.